A very warm welcome to all of you, wherever you might be watching from around the world. Welcome to KDRTV. It is 10:20 here in Central America, Central Standard Time. It is 11:20 Eastern Standard Time, and it is 6:20 p.m. in East Africa. Very delighted to have you on the show today, and we're going to continue having a good conversation we had for quite a number of months right now that is generating a lot of interest among us, many, not just the diasporans, but people around the world. So we are honored today to start another interesting conversation that we promised a week ago, and that is to talk about Black and immigrant women in leadership and workplace in the United States. It's a very interesting subject, quite frankly, sometimes that evoke emotions amongst the many people. But we have brought two extremely brilliant women who are going to engage in a very candid conversation around issues that affect women, not just African immigrant women in the United States, but also African Americans who are natives of this country. So during the course of the conversation, we encourage you to go to our Facebook Live, make comments and questions if you so choose. Also, go on YouTube, where we're streaming live, and Twitter, and make your comments. We'll be happy to play some of the comments and questions at the end of the show. And then shortly after this discussion about Black and immigrant women experiences in leadership, we're going to move to East Africa, where we're going to dissect the legal system in Kenya. We have Delphine Lego, who is also vying for a seat in the judicial system of Kenya. She'll be on at 11:20 Central Time, which will be 7:20 East African time. So right now, I'm going to bring the two wonderful women who are going to engage in this conversation. To my left, I want to start. Hey ladies, how are you? You look fantastic. I'll tell you that for sure.
Thank you.
Then, and I want to, before I do that, I have to introduce you to the viewers. You have very beautiful and excellent resumes. It's way too long, but I'm going to just go quickly, begin with Courtnye, who is joining us from Indiana. Courtnye Llyord, she's an educator, she's a professor, just like me, a consultant and a researcher dedicated to creating anti-racist spaces where people of color thrive. And that's really very relevant to the discussion we are having here today. She holds a master's in education policy and management from Harvard Graduate School of Education, and is currently a diversity fellow and doctoral candidate at Boston College studying applied developmental and educational psychology. Harvard. That really makes me a bit nervous, but glad to have you, Courtnye. Currently, she also teaches undergraduate and graduate psychology courses and conducts research on education and career development of Black and Latino people across lifespans, and anti-racist philosophy, so philanthropy. That would be really interesting perspective we're going to have. And then to my right, depending on where you are, we bring on Latifah Kiribedda. Latifah, you pronounce that, I say that Kiribedda, but you let us know in a moment what that is. Latifah, joining us with a beautiful smile there. She's a senior manager, consumer operations at Colourpast, and a co-founder of Uganda Empowerment, Women Empowerment in Minnesota. Latifah is a native of Uganda. She holds a Bachelor's of Science in Public Health and from St. Catherine University, and an MBA in Business Analytics from the University of St. Thomas here in St. Paul. At the moment, she's also a co-founder, as we said earlier on, of the Uganda Women Empowerment in Minnesota, which aims at connecting and empowering women through career building, community networking, leadership, mentorship, business, and life skills. That's really important for us. She also serves as a volunteer on the Committee for Muslim Space, a community organization that fosters an open, inclusive, pluralistic, multicultural space for self-identified Muslims and the broader community. So really very interesting perspective, very interesting backgrounds, which I think is going to be very fruitful in this discussion. So I want to start with you, Courtnye. Did I introduce you well? Introduce yourself quickly to the viewers. I want to hear your voice.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremiah. Really delighted to be here. Thanks for inviting me. So currently I am engaged in research that looks at Black and Latinx people's experiences from youth into their adulthood as they have been pursuing their interests in sciences and science careers. And then also looking at why Black and Latinx people leave a trajectory towards science, because we know that historically and also ongoing, there is racism, sexism, and marginalization of these groups within the science fields in the U.S. And so really wanting to have research that looks at the overall lay of the land across education and workplaces in order to inform practices and policies that support Black and Latinx people's success and retention within these spaces.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. That's going to be really interesting. And then we bring on Latifah.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Okari, and thanks for inviting me. I am originally from Uganda, I think, to start with. My leadership experience spans diverse industries globally, including leading projects and programs in international development, experience of leadership in the nonprofit sector, medical device corporate leadership, and leadership roles in social impact organizations. In my current role at Coloplast, I am part of the leadership team for the whole company for the United States, which leads approximately 100 employees. I lead a team of 10, specifically in the consumer operations department, and oversee our consumer operational strategy and data performance reporting. So I can tell you that as an immigrant and first African to hold such a role, I've definitely come to some key learnings that I hope I can be able to share today. And then, of course, with my work with the Uganda Women Empowerment in Minnesota, again, our mission is to connect and empower each other as immigrants, right, far away in the diaspora. We share resources, social and economic opportunities with one another. Briefly, I also just want to mention, because I think this is relevant for some viewers that are here in the US, I came to the United States as an international student. And during my time at St. Kate's, I campaigned and got elected as the Student Senate President, who was the first international student and the first African to hold that position. For those listening from Uganda or Kenya, that's the equivalent of a University Guild president. Two other things here that I want to highlight that I think is in the context of the conversation we want to have today. After my bachelor's degree here in the US, I got a job offer with the Minnesota Department of Human Services. I also got another job offer to return home to Uganda and work with the United States Agency for International Development. I chose to return home because I was passionate. I wanted to make a difference. So I returned to Uganda and worked as a program manager. I was actually promoted within 3 months of arriving home. And in that role, I was also the only woman on the management team and the youngest. I think those are really important. I've kind of, I guess the summary of who I am here is that I've found myself where I'm always almost the minority, both in terms of either race, gender, or age in the spaces that I have sought to occupy.
Okay, very good. So thank you. Excellent intro there. Excellent, both of you. I think based on those introductions, it really gives us a good base from which we have to work. I mean, there are many other issues that that revolve around women of color, especially, and we cannot really exploit all of them today. But we're going to focus on a few issues here. Courtnye is a native of the United States, so probably she might not have that immigrant perspective. And you, Latifah, you have the immigrant perspective. But we do also know that women across the country, particularly the minorities, do go through a lot of challenges. And maybe this conversation will be a start to what could be more productive within those two communities. If you could, and by the way, congratulations, you ladies have worked very hard. You've achieved what you've achieved, and I'm sure the future is much brighter than it is right now. To begin with you, Courtnye, what are some of the challenges that you think most Black women face in the workplace, and particularly in the endeavor to grow?
Yeah, I think, two words come to mind, right? Racism and sexism. And so a couple of ways that plays out as challenges are that, so we can think about in the Black community, African American community, there is a phrase that a lot of us grew up learning, which is to you have to work twice as hard to get half as much. And that really speaks to the experiences of myself, so many people I've seen, as well as what the research shows, that Black women are judged more harshly for their missteps, and they're also not given as much credit for their successes. Especially if we compare their circumstances to white men who are in leadership roles. So this means that, for one, Black women are often overlooked for advancement and for leadership opportunities. And then also when they have roles, they're not given as much chances. As we all make mistakes, right? They're not going to be given a second chance as often as other people from who have other identities many times. So that's kind of one overarching issue. The second that's related to the oftentimes unconscious biases, sometimes they're conscious biases, which are, racist, sexist. Those play out in that Black women are sometimes stereotyped. And this particular stereotypes that African American women face are that we're angry and that we're too aggressive, we're difficult to work with. So this means that people sometimes will distort the communication, the actions of Black women in leadership roles. So if you think about, being assertive, being confident, being direct, being a go-getter, those are characteristics that when white men in leadership roles, are doing them, they're seen as oftentimes as great leaders who are able to kind of push a team forward. When Black women in leadership roles are doing that, there's sometimes a perspective of they're being angry, they're overly aggressive, right? They're being viewed through the lens of these stereotypes. So, for example, I experienced this when I was in a role and managing a program for youth development, and I asked for a one-on-one meeting with a colleague who is a man, not a person of color, not a Black person. And the first thing he said when we sat down was, "Are you going to punch me in the face?" And, he said it kind of kidding, but it really showed me such a contrast because it was a predominantly Black organization. And my Black colleagues oftentimes I felt perceived me as too nice or as very mild mannered, right? And so then to see that this was the first thing that my colleague here is saying really showed me, oh, wow, you are bringing this stereotype to me. And now I have some choices to make of how am I going to respond? What does this mean for navigating the rest of my communications with him? So it's just another layer on top of the actual work itself.
So interesting. And that's just the beginning of the many challenges that Black and immigrant women face. Latifah, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, that's really good. And I think Courtnye made some really great points here. In my context, I guess, as an African woman, I would like to approach this in the context of both the workplace, in the corporate environment, or even other professional spaces that people out there might occupy in the public or private sector. But also I want to touch a little bit on immigrant women because we work closely with them here in Minnesota. Well, first I want to say that I know that research shows that immigrant women are actually much less likely to occupy like managerial or professional occupations compared to US-born women. And the research says that, and I tend to listen to podcasts and so on because I want to progress in my career, so I tend to listen to things that can educate me to get there. But from my experience, I think one of the main challenges is that we lack a diversity in leadership in a lot of the spaces we seek to occupy. And to me, when we don't have Black or immigrant women in these leadership roles that we are seeking, it makes us almost invisible, right? And we lack the support to help us advance to the top. From my experience, I've found that, you have to work extremely hard. So I agree with Courtnye. As immigrants, actually, for us, it's like I always had the mantra, we have to work like 10 times harder to really prove our intellect, to prove our capabilities. So we really end up spending a ton of time focused on just our performance in the workplace. But then we also still lack the exposure to the senior leaders who are supposed to see you in order to influence your next promotion or to recognize you and award you the next big assignment or raise or whatever that kind of recognition in the workplace would look like. I think that when you have people who share your lived experience or share an identity like yours and understand your challenges, then it is much easier to seek the blueprint, or maybe we can also call it the formula for success of how those who have made it actually manage to climb the ranks. Okay. So I think that's really important for corporate. The last point I want to make on this one is that for Uganda Women Empowerment in Minnesota, I have actually seen that many immigrant women, when they come to this country, are very highly educated in the countries they are coming from. And when they come here, the system is so hard for them to navigate and take on the same leadership roles that they had in their countries when they get here. So a lot of them end up owning their own businesses or starting their own organizations and initiatives, right? In the Ugandan community, at least I know, and I think there are a lot of others from Kenya or Nigeria and other places, from cooking and catering, braiding our hair, to grocery stores, to fitness and wellness. But what I have observed is that many of these businesses and organizations also lack the skills and coaching they need to grow their businesses and organization. Because in the US, the system can also be a very complicated system, navigating the legal things you're supposed to take care of, the financial system, So I think the skill gap also is a challenge for women taking on leadership in their own businesses and organizations. And there is a missed opportunity there, I think, for women and immigrants in that space.
Okay, so good points, and I think as the two ladies, as you discuss this and you do so eloquently, a lot of men, especially the black men, are watching this, and they are saying, if you are working 10 times harder, then the black man is working 10,000 times harder to even prove the very basic point. But regardless, I appreciate the fact that at least there are challenges, but you two have worked very hard, and there are many women also who have very good stories to tell. But we cannot talk about challenges as well. So given the challenge that we already mentioned there, Courtnye, to begin with you again, how do we black and immigrant women deal with those challenges that you mentioned?
Yeah, I think, I want to just offer this idea of intersectionality as a framework for us to think about black women as well as African immigrant women, that there's these, so we can think about in the US, right? There's racism. That's one form of oppression. There's there's sexism, there's class oppression, there's xenophobia. And so black women experience these particular forms of challenges in very specific ways that oftentimes will overlap with the challenges that black men face. But there's also oftentimes some particular differences that emerge in which from kind of thinking about this intersectionality, when we think about, whose stories are getting told in terms of, supporting people who are experiencing discrimination and injustice, oftentimes it's the black women's voices and stories that are not getting told as much. And so, I think there is some misnomers at times about, what black women are experiencing, because we don't hear about the challenges as much as what you would hear about the challenges for black men within the black community, as well as in more of like mainstream media and news stories in the US. So I think one of the things to think about in navigating the challenges is that, of course, organizations need to be the ones changing their practices and policies and culture to make them spaces in which Black women leaders and immigrant women leaders are supported. But as we are pushing for that, we also are in these roles and facing these challenges. So one thing I've learned is the importance of knowing the game of the politics of the situation that you're in, the settings that you're in. So understanding, who are your advocates, and particularly based on your identity as a Black woman, who are my advocates, who are going to be the people throwing me under the bus if I make a mistake, or who are waiting for me to make a mistake. Okay. And then also thinking about the politics of calling things out that when you're facing those comments that are, stereotypes or biases, understanding that there may be consequences for you to call people out on things like that. And so really it's just having that understanding so you know how you want to navigate and make decisions.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Good point. Thank you for giving that positive view. Latifah, yes, it sounds negative, and thank you for those encouraging comments. Courtnye, I was looking at the Center of National Educational Statistics, and the findings are very, very interesting. Actually, it shows that 60% of college graduates who have master's degrees in the United States are women. This is not something that used to be in 1965, not too long ago. For doctoral students, including Courtnye, 54% of doctoral students really are women, which suggests that over the next decade or so, we're going to have more women graduating with advanced degrees and therefore going into the workplace. And we are saying also the immigrant and the Black women really should be part of the conversation. To you, Latifah, what do you say then? How do you handle those challenges so that the Black and immigrant women play a much bigger role in the social, economic, and political development of the country?
Well, first of all, thank you for those interesting statistics, because I think they further affirm the fact that the issue is not that we are not well educated. I think we are well educated, and those statistics continue to increase for Black and immigrant women from the statistics you just shared. But it's also not an issue that we lack ambition. We have ambition, and we want to occupy those spaces. But to go back on the challenge that I shared about lack of diversity and representation, I will recommend, I think, something that has worked for me, but also is supported by documented research. One of the things that Black and immigrant women need, and I think similar to what Courtnye shared, is we need sponsors in the spaces we want to occupy. And sponsors should not be confused with mentors. Both are important, but they are different. A mentor is someone who advises you, right? But a sponsor is someone who advocates for you. And usually that person is in a senior level leadership role in your company or organization. We need these people of influence in our corner advocating for us, so that when it's time for, that leadership role promotion or that project assignment that involves traveling globally or pay raises, those people will know your story and your potential, and they will see you regardless of the color of your skin. And from my experience, I think the reality is that in order to climb the ladder of corporate America, and I think I've learned this the tough way, is that it's not just about your strength, right? I like to work hard, and I would do all these different things in my cubicle and do good work, but it's not enough to just have strength and talents. You also need other people, and by other people, I need other people who are the influential people in the organization to be willing to recognize, support, and develop those strengths that you bring to the table, right? You need other people basically to see you. I just want to share briefly here that in my situation, I didn't have Black or immigrant women around me. I'm the first Black person, first African, of course, to hold this type of role that I hold in a corporate environment. And when I was reflecting a little bit about my journey, I honestly took ownership of my professional development. My boss was white, all the people in the ladder were white people, but I did not shy away from communicating my value. So in every performance review, here is what I did. Most people come to a performance review to be told how they performed. I literally had a document that says, here is what I accomplished this year. Here is the impact it has had on the business. Here is my ambition for next year. And by the way, here is my ask for the projects I want to do. And here are the skills I want to develop. does this align with the strategy of where you want to go, right? That person cannot ignore you, right? When you articulate your goals to others as a Black woman or immigrant woman, you will be connected to other people, especially if you're highly valued and you, as an employee, and you are engaged, right? You're kind of making the way for yourself. You're hitting the concrete and saying, you have to see me. Okay. So I think that's really important.
So what I hear, both of you making very good points. I understand, yes, we can talk about the challenges facing the Black and immigrant women. We can talk about how we handle it. But what I hear from both of you, and by the way, you made good accomplishments, is that we really need to reach out. That's important. Just because there is an element of sectionalism, sexism, and racism, yeah, there is that. It has been there historically. It is now, and it will continue to be here for a while to come. But it is important for the Black and immigrant community women to also reach out to Asians, white, in the workplace for the prime goal of growing. Is that correct understanding, Courtnye?
I mean, I definitely am right there with Latifah that, you know, having those support systems who are willing to advocate for you, who are willing to be thought partners, are incredibly important. And especially, yeah, and you know, I have had people who are from diverse backgrounds, right, who have been those players for me. So it's huge, yeah.
And just to point out that Courtnye and I worked together over 10 years ago. It's interesting, the 10 years of there are those challenges. Both of us were actually laid off, but that did not deter us. And look at where we are right now. I'm going to get to you, Latifah, one quick point. Unique from Courtnye, for first-generation immigrant women, usually the challenges are much higher than the second or third generation. But you are saying sometimes you need to be the pioneer. Sometimes you need to really fight the hard way so that you set an example for the next generation, right, Latifah?
No, absolutely. And I think for me, part of what excited me about this topic, I realized I never talk about myself as a trailblazer. When you reached out to me about this discussion and I was trying to reflect on it, I realized I reflected on my journey. But I think my toolkit is that for every opportunity and ambition I have, I ask, what do they need? What do I have to offer? The fact that I'm Black or Ugandan or African or immigrant always comes after the fact. So I always come from what's the value and what's my story and how does this fit with the ambition I have. So I think that mindset is also actually really important, because from my experience, I think that's what this made me think about. I never think of myself as Black, African, Ugandan first. Those are important identities. But when I need something, I find out what the other place needs and what value I have to offer, and then I work for it.
Okay. Oh, good point. So, yeah, thank you both for that contribution. So, I don't want us to get into politics, but at the same time, we got to take advantage of what's happening on the political scene to make sense of what that is and relative to the Black and immigrant community, specifically the women. So let's talk about Kamala Harris. Courtnye, what do you think are the ramifications, or what does that mean for the Black and immigrant women?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great question. I believe that, you know, there's a lot of support in the Black community for having a Black woman as the VP nominee. I believe that, you know, when we think about historically, Black women, African American women have been the most loyal base of voters for the Democrats. And so, you know, people are ready to have, you know, representation in the White House, right, and in the administration on a higher degree. So there were actually about 150 Black leaders across, you know, kind of at a national level, who wrote a collective letter to Joe Biden before he announced that nomination, really saying, you know, it's time for it's been time for a Black woman. You know, this decision needs to happen where a Black woman is the VP nominee. And of course, right, in order for her to even have gotten to that position, she has to, right, like we said, go above and beyond in what her credentials are and what her qualifications are. So we know that she is more than capable of doing the job. I think it's also important to note that, you know, we're at a particular moment in history, right, where there's a national attention on the ways that the criminal and justice system has perpetuated violence against Black bodies and continues to do so. And her background as a prosecutor does kind of give makes some people skeptical. And I think there's particularly a generational kind of difference where there's a lot more grace, I feel like, in the older generations of the Black community around that, whereas you know, the younger millennials, Generation Z, are there. I think there's more skepticism around her background as a prosecutor, and also thinking about, you know, what the criminal and justice system has meant in the Black community. So yeah, it's an interesting moment in time for her nomination.
Oh, okay. Well, interesting time. And again, I understand talking politics sometimes can be like, again, depending on your political persuasion, that those ones who will be for or not for her. But it clearly does send a very strong message to a Black woman, particularly young children, knowing if they grow up, they can go beyond that. Latifah, you're giving a more immigrant perspective. Your thoughts on Kamala Harris?
Yeah, so I mean that's an interesting question for me, of course. Of course, I think Kamala, as a, you know, the first African American and first Black woman to be selected as a VP running mate is a big deal, right? In the context of this conversation we are having. Again, to go back to my point, I think for me, Kamala is the epitome of representation of diversity in leadership. I strongly believe that it matters who is at the table making decisions that impact our lives, that impact the lives of immigrant and Black women in America. And this is not an issue of who. She could be a Democrat, she could be a Republican. The point I'm trying to make here is that regardless of who you support, the important learning for me here is that when I see women of color who are trailblazers and are creating that blueprint that I talked about, it's really a great opportunity to lay the stage for other women of color to dream big and to follow their footsteps. But I think an interesting point, Dr. Okari, here that is also very clear is that, you know, I think that she amplifies those challenges we are talking about, right? So if people have read in the news around some of the accusations and things that are coming in, right, it amplifies this conversation we are having, you know, around her, you know, being a Black woman and, you know, where she's from or whether she's qualified for the job or not, or whether she was born here or born somewhere else. Those types of things show you exactly what we are talking about, except this is now on a global platform, that our challenges as Black or immigrant women, they are real. But that should not stop us. We can be able to transcend them.
Junior, you can put some of them. Okay. So, interesting perspective there. Again, politics is politics. We've been lucky enough to have one Black person in the White House. That meant a lot. We are potentially going to have another one, potentially, just those words very carefully. Latifah, do you foresee a situation where you see an immigrant woman going that high? Or could that be you? Or could that be you?
I haven't thought that far. I mean, politics, you know, I seek advice, and I can't say never, but right now I would rather that my impact is focused within communities and leading organizations and efforts where outside of politics for right now, I would say. But it would be fun to have more.
Oh, you've done it. You're doing incredible work for the Ugandan Association here in the U.S., and you've been back to Uganda to do great work there. So it will surprise me not if I hear you as the next first president of Uganda. So, as long as you invite Courtnye and I to come to your inauguration, that would be great. So let's talk about this topic here. It's very interesting. Sometimes some people might ask, Jeremiah, why do you have Black and immigrant? So there is this conversation among academics sometimes, the difference between black and immigrants. Some people say black Americans. I don't know what the difference is, black Americans to African Americans. And there are those ones who say they're those Africans or the continental Africans, right? So there's also no, the African American problem is not my problem. It's a problem with those ones who were born in America. In fact, one person was telling me the other day, the African Americans are those ones who are the descendants of slaves, right? But anybody who came here through any airport probably is not African American, is a continental African. So here's a question for you two ladies. At the workplace, it really doesn't matter whether you are born in Chicago or Mississippi or in Nigeria or South Africa. Black is black. Going forward, what do you think, or how should we work together, whether you're continental African or African American, how should we work together in such a way that we can really tell our story in the most positive way? Let me begin with you, Courtnye.
Yeah, I love that question. I believe that one of the most important things to think about is knowing, one, the history of the U.S., the place that we're in, because I think a lot of times, you know, when you think about media that's exported around the world and the images of Black people in this country that are exported around the world, they're often aligned with those stereotypes that we started talking about, and often are portraying Black people, Black communities as being, as that there's something wrong, right, with folks. So I think it's really important for people to understand actually what Black communities have been through, and the resilience that we are showing every day in this country. And so I think that's a big part of it, and having a shared understanding of each other's histories across the diaspora. And then I think it's also, Jeremiah, like you said, seeing each other as part of each other's communities. I think that, you know, I've had classmates, I've had students who've talked about, who are children of African immigrants, and they've talked about how their parents specifically taught them not to identify with or hang out with, you know, Black folks, and to really separate themselves, being intentional to separate themselves and distinguish themselves from other Black people, Americans in this country. And so I think part of it is really seeing how we have a shared narrative, a shared story, and acknowledging one another, even as just, you know, I see you in the hallway, right? If I've been taught, socialized, if I see another Black person, a Black woman at my school, at an organization, I'm going to give them a little nod. I'm going to say hello. You know, I see you. I see you are here, and that you are somebody who's, you know, I identify with as a Black person. And I think even having those small moments starting off between, you know, African immigrant communities and Black multi-generational, you know, Americans, that is going to be part of the collectivity that we need to foster in order to get our shared stories and shared narratives out.
Okay. So thank you, Courtnye. You know, Latifah, it's interesting. In my classroom, one of the most humbling experiences sometimes is when my students come in, whether they're from Nigeria, whether they're from Tennessee, whatever that, but as long as they see that sound and color that looks like them, it is very encouraging. It's really uplifting for them. Yes, of course, we want to focus on academics, but really it says a lot. Even at the workplaces, you see us grouping in that manner. What do you say to immigrants who might say, you know, that's an African-American problem, but forgetting that actually we are neighbors, forgetting the fact that our children, surely in the next 10, 20 years, our children are going to get intermarried, and through that, those are going to be our grandchildren and their lives. What do you say to them, Latifah, on that note?
Yeah, Dr. Okari, that's a great question, actually. I think for me, when I think about this one, I think that African immigrant and Black American women, we do have, I completely concur with Courtney that we do have that shared narrative. We have commonalities in our shared experience. But actually, I want us to also be able to acknowledge that we also have diversity within our lived experiences. So Latifah, who grew up somewhere, in Uganda, somewhere in a place somewhere in an urban area in Uganda, and Courtney grew up in Indiana, our lived experiences are also diverse and different, and they shape our worldview. And I think the reality is that society today, our personal identities are political. If you identify as a Black person, you actually don't have to identify. If your skin says you are a Black person, or if you are, a woman in society, those labels come subscribed with certain ramifications. So when it comes to Black African immigrant women or Black American women, our burdens are similar when it comes to institutional oppression, right? And for those who need a quick definition on institutional oppression, I think Courtney talked about this a little bit, but basically I think this is where the systems that we have in place or the institutions that we have in place here in the US are set up with either practices or laws or like custom things that happen that continue to like produce inequities based on someone's membership to an identity group. So Dr. Okari, for me, two things. I think that one, I have to recognize your efforts in creating these types of platforms that bridge this gap for me to be able to come on a talk show and engage with, a brilliant mind like Courtney. You are getting us connected to have these conversations, and I think this should continue because it's important that we connect with one another. The second piece for me to close this out maybe would be that we have a huge opportunity for partnership. So when I talked about the Uganda Women Empowerment in Minnesota, those women have to navigate the American legal system or the financial system. There are so many African American women starting really great businesses, right? And they have Black-owned businesses. We need to learn from them. But then those women also need our business as African immigrant women, right? So we need each other, and I think there is an opportunity for partnership. And as we continue these platforms that bring us together, I think we shall be more powerful together.
One thing I can assure you is that KDRTV is going to be the platform. So that I can guarantee you. As long as you look straight to the camera and promise our viewers that you'll be coming back to engage in this conversation. It's not a one-time invitation. It's a lifelong invitation so that we can engage these conversations. And so just to be fair for the viewers, I know many people are making good comments there and posting questions. If you have any questions, please post those questions on the comment section on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, so that we can have 2-3 questions from, so that the two absolutely brilliant ladies can answer those. So do you have any thoughts or any questions, any thoughts there, Courtney?
Wholeheartedly agree. There needs to be more spaces and platforms created to have these conversations that are bringing together the experiences and voices of Black and African immigrant people. And I think sometimes in, like if I look at research, a lot of times everybody's kind of lumped together, and that diversity that Latifah we're talking about is really not discussed as much when we think about these issues in the workplace and in education. And there's a lot of identities that people are bringing and experiences across classes. We can think about colorism, where, the way that supremacy is, that if you have lighter skin, people are often viewing you as closer to white, right? And so, which means with white supremacy, you're seen as superior, and your intelligence and beauty standards, all of these things. So these are the nuances that I think are really important for us to openly talk about and acknowledge about. How can we break this down so that we're all able to have justice?
Courtnye, while I have you there, Stella Mugaka from the East Coast is asking, why do African Americans look down upon their own African immigrants? So, depending on how you define African Americans, and I know you don't speak on behalf of the entire community, your thoughts?
So, I don't want to be the representative of the African American community.
Of course not.
But I can speak from my own experience, what I've seen. And, I think for me, it's interesting because, and, I grew up in Indiana in the Midwest region of the country, where there weren't and aren't very many African immigrants or, people from across the diaspora who are here. So in my mind, and what a lot of us, I think that I was around originally thought is that, oh, I see you're Black, you're part of my community. And then I think over time, realizing that, oh, actually, like, they don't African immigrants don't necessarily see themselves as being part of my community. Like, they may or they may not. And so I think for me, there's been an openness of, I'm inviting you to the cookout if you want to be there, if you see yourself as part of the community. But I also recognize that might not be, that might not be something that folks see themselves. But I will say, the people who, may have a negative viewpoint, it goes back to what are the stereotypes and the images of, sorry to say, but largely the continent of Africa is in the U.S. It's a very racist portrayal of Africans that are on the media in this country. So
Latifah, to come to Latifah, Courtnye is really trying to make a good point there. But let's be honest, for those of us who grew up in Africa, sometimes the images we saw on TV were very negative. And sometimes I make jokes with my students in class, and I tell them the only movie I had watched before coming to America was Coming to America. And really, when you look at that movie, it doesn't really depict a very good story of a guy coming from Africa. On that same question, Latifah, could the question be reversed the other way around? Your thoughts?
I don't know if the question would be reversed the other way around, but I think there is something to note here. And I'm glad you mentioned movies, because I think my mind went to Chadwick Boseman. I remember when I went to watch Black Panther, and I saw a woman who wore braids just like me. I think it's Letitia Wright, if I remember correctly. And when the movie ended, there was some white man and his family right in front of us. And I said, wow, that normalized wearing braids in the workplace for a Black person in a movie that is selling out at the post office. And I felt really at home seeing a Black woman wearing hair and someone I could see myself as, I guess. And we have that shared experience as African immigrant or Black American women when it comes to the perception of our professionalism in the workplace. So I think to me, so I think that's one example of showing that we have a shared experience, but it goes back to my point earlier. Yes, we are Black, but we also have diversity in our lived experiences. Me growing up in Uganda is very different from someone growing up in Indiana. And until we have a cup of tea or coffee to understand what those are, we also have dialogues we need to have within, and not just across other races, but also within the Black community, whether it's Black Americans or African immigrants, because our experiences are different, although we have some commonalities.
Okay. Good point. And I think we say, sometimes people talk about culture, whether the African immigrant or African American culture. And I always tell people, including my students, you cannot define culture unless you bring in the element of time. So what was defined as a way of life in 1920 or 1930 surely is not the same way. And so that also means that we have an opportunity here to create history where our children and grandchildren will look back to our time and be so proud of what is it that we did for the benefit of the Black and immigrant women in the country. So as we conclude, by the way, Dolphina Alego in Nairobi, Kenya, she's standing by to come on. Let's talk about this. There's always been a conversation about the boy, girl, child, whatever that you want to take it. that for a long time it's been thought that the girl child has always been kind of not been treated very well. But in all truthness, the boy child, especially here in the United States, has really been a very bad situation given what we've seen on our national televisions. What do you say to the young boy or young black girl watching this today? To start off with you, Courtnye.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, when I think about black girls and how, again, like, black girls are facing a lot of similar challenges to black boys. The disparities, if we look at, suspension rates, expulsion rates, are black girls compared to white girls are the same as black boys compared to white boys. So our children are up against a lot. I would tell our young black brothers and sisters that, you are brilliant, you are beautiful, you are special, and you can do anything you put your mind to. Despite all of the challenges that are in this country, you can do anything you put your mind to. And I think that it is on us as community members, as those of you who are parents, family members, to really uplift our children and to know that, there are people out there who, unfortunately, with the ways that racism plays out in school, who may tell our children in our community that they are not capable. And so I think it's really important for us to recognize the leadership skills that our children are bringing, that are often overlooked in our traditional kind of classroom spaces, but that are what makes them resilient and special, and for us to just really be advocates for our young people.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Those are encouraging words coming from a professor. I think the students must be enjoying. I wish I could go back and become your student again, Courtnye. That's good. Okay, Latifah, add on to that. There are many young girls and boys who've come to this country to achieve the American dream, but sometimes we know this American dream is not as really we were promised. What do you say to them, especially those ones who are watching it right now?
Yeah, as I'm thinking about this, I think my advice for the black child, boys or girls, immigrant, African American, brown children, I think from my journey, my advice would be that who you are is not defined by where you are in your life right now. So, and I think what that means is that when you seek an opportunity, and we all seek opportunities in life, some people are looking for roles, some people are seeking for leadership roles, whether it's in the public sector, some people are entrepreneurs trying to start or grow a company, or you want to become something, when you grow up. Some kids are starting businesses. I bought lip gloss from a young woman when I, somewhere at a friend's, social distancing party we were at. So whatever opportunity you're pursuing, remember to tell the story of who you are, not where you are. And what I mean by that, I think a lot of people make the mistake of looking at your situation right now, and you use that to drive for what next opportunity you're looking for. So to break this down, to me, who you are entails your unique experiences that have shaped your worldview, your decisions on how you see the world and where you see yourself going. So that's why a Latifah coming from Uganda, working in rural districts of Kasese and Chenjojo, can come in a corporate environment where I did not have business corporate experience, but because my story and what I can accomplish, I'm able to tell my story, not just of where I am, but of who I am as a person, and other people are able to see that and see my value proposition. That's what, as a black child, is going to distinguish you from everybody else. So I just want to also make it clear, though, that that will make it likely for you to beat the odds and probably transcend the narrative of the challenges we are talking about in the systems we are living and working in every day in America. but we are not tokens. I also want to emphasize that. Us who make it, it does not mean that that is reflective of the US population. So when people use one-off examples of Obama or Michelle Obama, or see Latifah has this role or Courtnye has done it this way, the statistics do not say we are reflective of the US population. But my advice to the Black child is maybe we will beat the statistics one day. Just craft your story and keep on fighting anyway.
Okay, very good. Well said. Hey, ladies, sometimes, let me tell I have to confess, sometimes it's not the easiest job to moderate a discussion of two extremely brilliant women, right? And I'm trying to swear here, but thank you for for allowing me to do this today. So on a lighter note, before I allow you guys to make your closing statement so that we bring on Delphina from Kenya, it's COVID-19, it's the aftermath of George Floyd, and things are not very well. I'm going to start with you, Courtnye. What is the most delicious African food that you've had?
Oh man, okay. Well, that's a good question. I think probably the one that I've had that I've enjoyed, I don't know the name of it, but I know I like jollof rice, and I've gone to a few events where I'm not sure what all was on it,
okay,
but that one, but everything was
okay, Courtnye, I'll make your life easier. The next time you are in St. Paul, Minneapolis, you and I are going to invite ourselves to Latifah's house to enjoy some Ugandan food. How is that? Okay, that's it, Latifah. Thank you, Latifah. To you, Latifah, what is your best African American music? What's your best?
Oh, that's a real good one. I like some R&B. I like some old, like hip hop from back in the day, like the Jarul kind, not the one of today. But I do love a lot of the African American music from back in the day. But some R&B anytime. Okay,
very good. Well said, thank you. So, Courtnye, we have only 2 minutes to go. 1 minute, do you mind? We're going to have you alone on the screen and make your closing statement. There are people watching across the country. There are people watching from Kenya, from Uganda, and other parts of Africa. So, talk to the world. Your closing statement.
Yeah. So, thank you so much. I think one of the things just that really stands out in my mind that undergirds this conversation is that when we think about the U.S., when we think about colonization around the world, and the creation of race as an idea, it has been used to divide and conquer, right? And so when we think about the divisions between different people of African descent, it is up to us to be able to come together and learn about each other and our histories to understand how we can work in order to gain resources, to build power collectively, to transform unjust systems. And I also think as leaders, that it's important for us to support those who are coming up, right? Support the young people who may have radically different ideas than older generations, but to have a plan for us to carry on leadership so that we're bringing in our young people as being leaders right now, because they're ready. And it's up to us at a certain point, and particularly as the older generations, to kind of get out of the way and let young people shine as well as leaders in our communities. So, thank you for having me, Jeremiah, and it's been amazing to talk with you and Latifah. And I am just really hopeful about the partnership between Black Americans and immigrant communities from this conversation.
Thank you, Courtnye. And to you, Latifah, closing statement, the world is watching you.
Yeah, so I think my quick closing statement here would be that the challenges that we face as Black people in America, whether it's African immigrants or Black women or Black men in America, they are real. They are real. Whether that's, you know, the institutional oppression or racism or other challenges that we face, those challenges are real. But here is my closing message to all of you who are listening. I think that resilience is a must-have virtue for all of us as immigrants and Black women and men in America. There is so many obstacles that are coming that we have to navigate every single time and tackle as a Black person or immigrant person in America. So we have no choice but to be resilient. And to make that a bit more tangible, when doors close in your face, when you are in the thorns of injustice, it's very difficult, I know, but we have to pick ourselves up and we have to refuse to get derailed and maintain our focus to pursue our dreams. You know, I think Courtnye said it, I will repeat it. As immigrants, we've all had the mantra, you have to work 10 times harder. It's not going to become 9, 8, or 1. It's going to stay 10 times harder, if not higher. So always, always stay resilient. Produce quality work in everything that you do and do the best that you can, because we need to do that in order to be successful in this country. Thank you very much, Dr. Okari, for having me on your show. It's been really a pleasure, and I look forward to connecting to Courtnye and perhaps we can have more engagements with the African American community, because to be honest, we are not doing that as much today. So I think this is a great platform you're creating for us.
So before I let you go, you did make a promise. I did request you to promise the viewers that you will come back to continue this conversation. Courtnye, yes, no?
Yes, a definite yes.
Latifah, yes, no?
That would be a yes from me as well, Dr. Okari.
No, thank you, ladies. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I'm quite frankly very, very glad to call you two good friends. Courtnye, the story is long. 10 years ago, both of us laid off. But the story since then, as Latifah said, we did pick our pieces, and the story is very promising, and the future is, it couldn't be much brighter. Thank you for coming on, and we'll love to see you again here sometime soon. Latifah, thank you so much. I met you at a gas station. It's been fantastic, and I'm sure our viewers enjoyed that extremely brilliant and intellectual conversation. So thank you so much, ladies. I'll talk to you after the show. And for our viewers, before you step off, please go to Facebook on KDRTV, facebook.com, and like us and make a comment. Also go to YouTube and subscribe. All you need to do is just click subscribe. You don't have to pay anything, and that should be good. Also follow us on KDRTV on Twitter, and that'd be good for us. Again, for our viewers, stand by. We're going to go for a short commercial break, 2 minutes, and then we'll go to Kenya, and we're going to dissect the judicial system there, and Dolphina Elego is standing by. Thank you.